Welcome again, sisters and brothers, as we begin this next session. And the next activity is going to be to receive the report from the Finance Committee. And I'll just share with you that really over the last 9 years, as we have met as an executive committee and then in the Central Committee, but really frequently, our Finance Committee was one of the last reports to present, and we just read through our recommendations, and people really supported those recommendations. So if you all are listen to these recommendations and you're ready to move forward with receiving the report, affirming it, and supporting those recommendations, then we will do that so we can move through with our business today and go on to the other committees that we have to do. So I turn to His Eminence Metropolitan Zachariah Nikolovos and have him and the rapporteur begin to present.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters in Christ. I will just do the introduction, and the rapporteur will give us the recommendations. And since it's finance, we always welcome any suggestion to improve our finances. So it is not that we have exhausted all the ideas. Let me start by thanking my 21 fellow members of the Finance Committee. Together, we tackled our task with courage as we addressed 9 years of financial information, ranging from the work of the Audit Committee to IT strategy and initiatives in income development. We advanced consciously as one group throughout, taking time to discuss different points of view and checking progress on emerging recommendations with the consensus cards. And in this work, we also asked ourselves what it means to be gathered together at one table with shared Christian values and in a spirit of stewardship, to come to an understanding about how each might contribute in different ways with their different talents to ensure the sustainability of WCC. Our mandate focused on the guidance to Central Committee on matters of financial strategy and on financial policy. To a very high degree, therefore, the proposed decisions which are present to you are for action by the new Central Committee, who, with the directions proposed, will later consider a fully developed financial strategy as well as draft policies which should be approved next year. In the directions which we propose are the result of the Finance Committee's work together. We are in solidarity as we present the work to you. Before our rapporteur, Reverend Merlin Hyde-Riley, reads the recommendations, let me first share our sincere gratitude to all the member churches, ecumenical partners, and others who have made financial contributions and other contributions to the work of WCC, and so faithfully over this last cycle. As we assess the income perspectives for the next 4-year cycle of work, we envisage an annual target of Swiss francs 14.8 million in program income. We know that much can be achieved with such a sum, and that we will be inspired also to work in new and creative ways. Please, we call on you to give as you are able towards the work of our fellowship. Some have asked when we will begin to earn income from the Green Village project. We say, let us rejoice first that WCC completes its first objective this year, as we presented for your recognition in the recommendations. Before we reap income, we must sow. So by launching the construction of Lima building, and to do that, we must first sell at least one more land plot. The timeline suggests rental income in 2028. Let us be patient. We will work to achieve it. The detail of the report explains and what challenges we will address in the transition years in the next 4-year cycle as we keep our eyes on good perspectives ahead. Now, Our rapporteur, Aaron Merlin, will read the recommendations.
I begin with recommendation number 1, financial stewardship from Busan to Karlsruhe. The AFC recommends that when approving the new strategic plan, the new Central Committee ensures that plans for the new cycle of work focus on the WCC's unique role, addressing those activities which only the WCC is best placed to do, and that the number and range of projects be adjusted to be mindful of the economic realities. Consideration be given to those projects considered priority by the Program Guidelines Committee. Focus be placed on the roles of the regional ecumenical organizations and national councils of churches, and the WCC's commitment to work jointly with them to nurture greater coherence in developing relations with and among the member churches. Consideration be given in the strategic plan to ways of amplifying the common witness of the member churches in the critical work of common concern, and efforts be made to take into account work conducted by ACT Alliance as coordinated by its secretariat when planning WCC initiatives in areas of common concern. 2, 4-year financial plan. The AFC shares the following additional general guidance on the 4-year financial strategy and recommends to the new Central Committee that the overarching principle be that expenditure plans be adjusted to match available income in any year. Authority be invested in the General Secretary in consultation with the leadership of the Central Committee to adjust, close, or open a project as may be required between meetings of the Executive Committee. With reference to the new Rule 6.4b and Rule 19.11, a target be set for the 4-year period concerning the number of the scheduled meetings of the Central Committee and Executive Committee to be held electronically in order to reduce cost and the carbon footprints associated with travel. The financial strategy includes the requirement to prepare a risk assessment document on the planned removal to the Kyoto building in 2024 and then to the Lima building in 2027, with the aim of quantifying any recommended adjustment to the level of the general reserves. The objective to deliver and maintain a change management plan include the delegation of responsibility to the appropriate officers by the General Secretary. The financial strategy includes the plan for revision of the financial policies listed in FIN 09 with a timeline for those requiring revision as a priority in the 4-year period, and a financial strategy for 2023 to 2026 be developed under the above guidelines and reviewed by the Executive Committee before approval by the Central Committee in June 2023. 3, membership contributions. The AFC recommends that the plan for membership contributions be further developed to ensure incorporation of the values of Christian stewardship, fairness, transparency, and objectivity. A strategy be developed on how to actively involve those churches which do not contribute or are identified as possibly paying less than they could. And the new membership contributions plan be launched by the Central Committee in June 2023. 4, income development strategy. The AFC recommends that the income development strategy include milestones for both program contributions development and as measures for the engagement and effectiveness of leadership and program executives in fundraising activities. And the income development strategy be presented for approval at Central Committee in June 2023. 5, Assembly Fund. The AFC recommends that the new Central Committee ensure that the financial strategy include plans for establishment of the 12th Assembly Fund in the 4-year planning period 2023 to 2026, including consideration for an annual allocation of unrestricted contributions to the fund. Seriously take into account, when planning the 12th Assembly, a reduction in the number of days and a consideration as to the number of seats as well as subsidies granted, noting that a similar recommendation was made by the AFC of the 10th Assembly. 6, capital expenditure and real estate strategy. The AFC recommends that the new Central Committee consider the level of priority to be granted for investment and renovation at the Chateau de Bossé if it may be demonstrated that such investment would offer the opportunity to realize further financial potential. Number 7, the AFC IT strategy. Number 7 is IT strategy. The AFC recommends that the new Central Committee ensures that the IT strategy is developed and monitored within the context of the WCC Financial Strategy 2023 to 2026. 8, report of the Audit Committee. The AFC recommends that the Assembly take note that the Audit Committee reported that there have been no matters of contention concerning the annual statements under review, nor material issues raised concerning financial controls. Recognize with appreciation the voluntary commitment of the independent professionals who have served on the Audit Committee alongside Executive Committee members during the period under review. 9, report of the Pension Fund Committee. The AFC recommends that the new Central Committee require that the mandate of the Pension Fund Committee be revised to develop further the responsibilities for engagement with Profound with regard to its sustainability investment policy and the principles of climate responsible finance. Number 10, policies. The draft Code of Conduct for governing bodies, commissions, consultative and advisory bodies, reviewed by Central Committee 2018, be finalized and approved. The investment policy be revised as a priority. A policy be introduced governing compliance with the principles of climate responsible finance, as described in the WCC statement on the imperative for effective response to the climate emergency, June 2022. Follow-up is made in the form of definition of policy concerning the decision of Central Committee in June 2021, which required that the Executive Committee monitor the approach to foster inclusiveness in participation in WCC program meetings when digital means are adopted. And the new Finance Policy Committee of Central Committee take note that its mandate, as defined in Rule 10.5, was extended in June 2022 to include the responsibility to recommend policies related to significant issues concerning income-generating projects. 11, Green Village. The AFC recommends that the Assembly recognize with appreciation the role of the steering committee and in particular its leadership assured over the past 9 years, firstly by Bishop Olaf, the former General Secretary, and then by Reverend Dr. Professor Johan Soka, the Acting General Secretary, in guiding the Green Village project to success in its first phase. The Assembly recognized that the ecological standards and qualities of the development with its Sustainability Action Plan are signs of hope for the future. The Assembly recognized with appreciation that the work conducted has resulted in completion of the first objective of the project, with 18 million of the loans now reimbursed and the final loan of 6 million to be reimbursed on the 30th of September 2022. The Assembly decided that the outgoing steering committee retain its responsibilities until the new Central Committee appoint a new steering committee in the awareness that guidance may be needed by October with regard to strategy and to ensure that the interests of the WCC are protected. And the new Central Committee require that the new steering committee review the guidelines and indicators for the project in the financial strategy 2023 to 2026, as proposed in FINO 2, before approval of the financial strategy by Central Committee in 2023. 12, actions taken on report of the Finance Committee of the 10th Assembly. The AFC recommends that an accountability report on actions taken with regard to recommendations in this report be monitored by the Finance Policy Committee of the Central Committee and be shared with the Finance Committee at the 12th Assembly. This ends the summary of our report.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Merlin. And you can see that the Finance Committee had a full agenda and was very, very thorough in its work and in its recommendations. Now I am going to give an opportunity for a few moments at the microphone, but first of all, let me just kind of test the House and find out how are you feeling as you hear these recommendations. Would you show your cards about how you feel when you hear the recommendations? Good, thank you. We can hear a few comments at microphones, 1 minute each. I'll go to microphone 2.
I hope, moderator, you'll give me 2 minutes because I'm a member of the committee.
Well, since he was the moderator for the Finance Committee in the Executive Committee, you may have 2 minutes.
Yeah. Moderator, thank you very much. I would like to express my thanks to the Finance Committee who prepared this report. At the same time, moderator, if you do not acknowledge and appreciate those who have brought their contribution for this organization, the future generation are not going to acknowledge what we have done. Here I would like to speak about the outgoing General Secretary, the presiding bishop of Church of Norway, who has done enormous work, and we owe to him a lot. I think he is a gift from God to save us from the difficulties that we had 10, 12 years ago by creating a committee, bringing in experts from Norway, from Germany, from Switzerland, the lawyers, finding the best construction company, and saving the fund, the retirement fund. I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to this unsung hero that we owe a lot to him. Moderator number 2, I would like to speak about the staff. The staff that is, I don't know, I have to tell you something, I was really fed up with them because every single day, Alan Dake will send email one after another, Saturdays, Sundays, and I was afraid to look at my computer because there was a message from her. Please do it. Please answer my email. They work very closely with Bishop Olaf, and they help this organization. On behalf of everybody, I would like you to join me in thanking them and asking God to bless these 2 persons. Elaine, please get up and join me in applauding them. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you for that expression of gratitude for people that really have done amazing work to make what we're doing possible. I'll go to microphone number 1.
Thank you, Reverend Reginald Lee Backus, National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. I will be speaking in English. First and foremost, thank you to this committee as well as the past committee. I was a young adult delegate in Busan. I have seen the progress and tracked the development, so thank you. I want you to know people are watching, and we appreciate and applaud. One point that I would add in the accountability report and just in general is a emphasis and a intentional effort to look at indigenous and marginalized pension fund managers and money managers. For the pension fund, if we're going to address economic injustice and inequity, we have to take responsibility by doing the same thing, investing with those who come from indigenous and marginalized communities who know about sustainable investment and development. So I would encourage that to be in the accountability report, how we have spread around the resources in the management of the fund and future development. Thank you.
Thank you for that wisdom. Yes, microphone 4. Okay, good. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Moderator. Anderson Jeremiah, Church of England. My suggestion is a very quick one. It's simply when you are looking at the financial policy, perhaps the scrutiny could look into the resources and also the forms from where those resources have come from. So ensure that it is fair and just and do not have any historical links with any of the historical sources which has been exploitative and linked to slavery, and also connected to the modern day slavery that many of the resources could be connected, to ensure and scrutinize those financial contributions carefully monitored and carefully regulated within our member churches and contributions, as well as where we spend our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Microphone 1.
Joy Abdul Mohan, Delegate, Presbyterian Church of Trinidad and Tobago, and I speak in English. Thank you, Finance Committee, for a very concise report. Number 3, membership contribution. I'm thankful that churches were able to pay their fees, but I want to encourage churches to engage in proportionate giving. To whom much is given, much is expected, and to encourage those who are able to pay to adopt a church or maybe a region to assist with the fees, and maybe have that pilot project that we can share the resources, but also want to commit today that the Presbyterian Church of Trinidad and Tobago, in its budget meeting in October, will reconsider its fee to pay an additional amount. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Is there one more at microphone 1? Okay, one more at microphone 1, then we'll turn to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Vice Moderator. I applaud the work of the Finance Policy Committee. And I also applaud the ongoing work of the WCC for gender justice. However, as much as we talk of gender justice, nothing can happen without resources. I ask that the WCC ensure that all budgets and all policies make considerations of the gendered implications to intentionally include women, that program units set budgets and allocations for gender justice. In Section 10, we see a policy for climate responsible finance. I ask the floor, can we also have a policy for gender just finance? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn now to the moderator and the rapporteur for any final comments you would like to make.
Thank you for all the comments, and of course I was hoping there will be some suggestions to improve the income of the council, which didn't come up. And I encourage everyone to read the entire report because of the time restraints, so we were able to read only the recommendations. The whole report gives some flesh to what we have been, what have been read out. So all those suggestions we will try to incorporate, and some are the budgetary suggestions which the committee will take up. Anything more, Madeline?
Well, I just add in response to the last speaker that we indicated that expenditure had to be aligned with the priorities identified by the program committee. And so we have asked that committee to prioritize the expenditure because not the expenditure per se, but prioritize the programs that require the greatest attention. And then our expenditure will align itself to that because we do not have unlimited resources.
All right, Madam Moderator, Dr. Agnes, I think maybe the House is ready to make a decision if you'd like to see if they're ready to receive the report and adopt the recommendations.
Please show your cards if you are ready to take decision. I see majority. May I also then request us to show our cards to receive the report of the Finance Committee and adopt the recommendations that have just been read to you. Can I see your orange cards?
They're all orange and green.
Orange and green, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Metropolitan. The report is being received. The recommendations are adopted. Yeah. So now we move on to Program Guidelines Committee, again under the leadership of the Vice Moderator. Thank you for supporting with your cards.
Thank you, Finance Committee. And now as we welcome the Program Guidelines Committee, this is a hearing session for them, and their report will be used by the new Central Committee in order to develop the strategic direction and the program work for the next 8 years. And so we invite Reverend Karan and also Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia to come and briefly introduce the report and read to you the recommendations.
Dear moderator, dear delegates, I would like to start expressing my deep gratitude and appreciation for the members of the Program Guidelines Committee, especially for our rapporteur, Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson, and for the staff that served our committee. Could you please all stand up? Thanks. Thanks for serving. They worked so hard and so thoroughly to propose guidelines for further programmatic work of the World Council of Churches in a way that fits to what we hear and experience during the 11th Assembly in Karlsruhe. Delegates from different regions, different church families and different ages came together, no excursions for them, and most of the day, no lunch either, to review the work of the WCC from Busan to Karlsruhe, to propose overall policies for future programmatic work, and to look at possible priorities for future work in light of the Assembly mandates. Our full report is available for all delegates and advisors. In line with what Reverend Marianne Brekken proposed, we will not take time to read the whole report. The full report is online. Today we will read the recommendations. Hopefully we will have time to hear some of your reflections. If you want to speak and there should be no time, please send your comments to the committee before 7 o'clock in the evening. We will have a look at them before we come back to you tomorrow for the decision-making sessions on program guidelines. Moderator, please allow me to speak on the report for you in just a few lines before we will read the recommendations, and allow me to underline what program guidelines is about and to what it is not. The first very important point I want to make is we are a program guidelines committee, not the program committee. A renewed program committee will be established by the next central committee. During the assembly, we are mandated to come up with guidelines for future programmatic work. That means that we are not going to mention all the topics of our future programs. That would be way too specific for program guidelines. The second important thing to mention on the forehand is that we need to clarify on the status of the reports of the pre-assemblies and of the ecumenical conversations. The Program Guidelines Committee received the reports of the pre-assemblies. Members of the Program Guidelines Committee participated in the ecumenical conversations and reported back from them, as well as they did from the plenaries and from home groups. The affirmations and challenges mentioned in the reports of the ecumenical conversations and the messages of the pre-assemblies will be forwarded to the next Central Committee as food for thought, fruit for the spirit, within the guidelines we are deciding on during this assembly. And then the report itself, you'll find in our report recommendations on the pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity. It is a strong strategic direction for our programmatic work for the upcoming years, the umbrella for all our work. We discussed the program areas of unity and mission, public witness and diaconia, education and ecumenical formation. And what came up from several reports and from what we heard during the assembly is that the themes are not separated pillars, but that they really belong together and need an integrated approach. You will find it back in some of our recommendations. We discussed the strategic objectives for programmatic work and made recommendations on that. Strengthening the fellowship, deepening solidarity and communion, witnessing together as transforming disciples, encouraging spirituality and inspiring and innovative communication are the proposed strategic objectives for programmatic work. Within this framework, I'm sorry. Within these objectives, it was mentioned that a strong connection with and within all regions was underlined, so that no region will feel left behind. Strengthening collaboration with member churches and partners is recommended. The WCC is not an office in Geneva. The WCC is a fellowship of churches, a worldwide movement. We are inviting others on a pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity. We looked at the commissions. We prioritized climate change and sustainable development and made a recommendation to establish a new commission. We discussed the transversals for our work. We recommend to add one, and we recommend that the Central Committee reflect on the language for them in order to get their names consistent with the functions of transversals. And finally, we looked at ecumenical initiatives, reference groups and working groups. Working in an integrated way is at the heart of our reports. Let's go and listen to Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson.
As stated, we will deal with the recommendations in the report, and the report should be available to you in your app. So we're starting on page 2 of the report, paragraph 6. The Assembly receives with appreciation the report, Pilgrims on the Path of Peace, the journey of the WCC from Busan to Karlsruhe, and the pre-Assembly Program Evaluation Report. Paragraph 7. The Assembly receives the affirmations and challenges of the ecumenical conversations and the message of the pre-assemblies and forwards them to the Central Committee for further consideration and action. Paragraph 8. The Assembly affirms the recommendation from Indigenous peoples calling upon the WCC and its member churches to encourage the establishment of truth and reconciliation processes that are based on restoring justice and healing relationships wherever genocides have occurred. Paragraph 9. The Assembly affirms the 6 transversals: relations with member churches, national councils of churches and regional ecumenical offices, youth engagement in the ecumenical movement, just community of women and men, interreligious dialogue and cooperation, spiritual life and overcoming racism, racial justice, and xenophobia, which are identified for integrating the programmatic work, and asks the Central Committee to consider adding disabilities ministries as a 7th transversal for the work. Paragraph 10, the Assembly recommends the Central Committee examine the terminologies of the transversals. We're moving to page 3, paragraph 14. The Assembly affirms the model of the pilgrimage of justice and peace as a continuing strategic integrative direction and guideline for all programs of the WCC, and asks the Central Committee to consider how this model will continue as a part of the direction for the work of the fellowship. Paragraph 15. The Assembly recommends to the Central Committee the following strategic objectives: strengthening the fellowship and deepening solidarity and communion, witnessing together as transforming disciples, encouraging spirituality, reflection, and formation, and innovative and inspiring communication. Paragraph 18. The Assembly asks the Central Committee to maintain and nurture strong relationships with the 8 regions, with a focus on communication with member churches, national councils of churches, regional ecumenical organizations, and with the additional intention of strengthening communication with ecumenical officers and ecumenical representatives. We're moving to page 4, paragraph 23. The Assembly requests the Central Committee decide on the way how the program areas are divided. 24. The Assembly recommends that the next Central Committee establishes a pilgrimage reference group which includes members of all commissions for the purpose of integrating and building on the theological reflections presented in Towards an Ecumenical Theology of Companionship. Paragraph 25. The Assembly requests the Central Committee to provide clear mandates and resources for all WCC commissions. And 26, the Assembly affirms the need to strengthen the Young People in the Ecumenical Movement Commission. We're moving to paragraph 30, still on page 4. The Assembly invites member churches and ecumenical partners to commit to working together as a fellowship in a pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity. 31. The Assembly affirms the above understanding of our future methodology in which programmatic work has a strong relational nature and relational work strengthens the programmatic work. Moving on to page 5, paragraph 36. The Assembly affirms the World Mission Conference held in Arusha in 2018 and the report Arusha Call to Discipleship, and encourages holding a World Mission Conference in the years leading to the 12th Assembly, enabling the ecumenical movement to discern its missionary call. Paragraph 37, the Assembly asks the Central Committee to identify programs which unmask and resist the xenophobia and neocolonialism of our times, as well as the violence, division, and inequity they manifest. Paragraph 38, the Assembly asks that all WCC commissions be invited to provide models and methods for mission and unity that move the WCC to repair the damage, tend the wounds, and begin to realize healing from the legacies of colonization. Page 6, paragraph 45. The Assembly requests the Central Committee to form a commission on climate change and sustainable development. 46. The Assembly requests the Central Committee to form a reference group on overcoming racism, various forms of xenophobia, casteism, and all forms of discrimination. 47. The Assembly requests the Central Committee to form a commission on health and healing. 48. The Assembly reaffirms the importance of the presence of the WCC together with ACT Alliance and the member churches in responding to the needs and the protection of refugees, migrants, and stateless people, and asks the Central Committee to form a reference group on ecumenical diaconia. Paragraph 49, the Assembly requests the Central Committee that the work of the reference group on human sexuality be continued, especially to facilitate the conversations regarding conversations on the Pilgrim Way, invitation to journey together on matters of human sexuality with member churches and ecumenical partners who are open to dialogue on this matter. Paragraph 50. The Assembly requests the Central Committee to form a reference group on gender justice with member churches and ecumenical partners who are open to dialogue on this matter. Moving last but not leastly over to page 7, paragraph number 58, the Assembly affirms the network of institutions of higher ecumenical theological education, NIHETE, and the networking and collaboration it encourages among theological institutions. 59, the Assembly affirms that the WCC continue to explore digital adaptation and resourcing for the necessary infrastructure to support educational programs for theological and congregational education on hybrid platforms. Paragraph 60, the Assembly recommends the WCC serves as a hub for resources like curricula, methodologies for the churches and theological institutions. This will require adequate resourcing. There endeth the reading.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, thank you, thank you. As you can see, they have given oversight to a huge, enormous volume of work. Once again, we will have some opportunity here at the microphone, but they're helping us to really think about how we continue this journey as a pilgrimage of justice and reconciliation and unity. And it really is inspiring how we might move forward together. Let's hear now briefly from some different microphones. I'll begin with microphone 1.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Yona Katonene from Church of Uganda. I commend this report. It's a very good report. I have one concern while appreciating your affirmation of the role of theological institutions, which is very good, mainly which trains our ministers. The role of the laity centers is conspicuously missing, which are very instrumental in training the laity. We all know the role of Ecumenical Institute Bose, Mindoro Ecumenical Institute, and many other ecumenical institutes, and I think it is very important that the mission of the lay centers be added. And in this regard, I am proposing another paragraph in terms of recommendation. I think paragraph 50, this was 6061, which should read, the Assembly asks the Central Committee to look into the establishment of a committee to carry out a study of the laity question, including the Ministry of Lay Centers, lay academies, lay academies in the training and equipping of the laity, especially in the areas of leadership training, ecumenical learning, and laity formation. I end there.
All right, thank you. You're going to want to get that to them in writing so that they can see what you proposed. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I am Dr. Kawas from the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem. Thanks with gratitude to the committee for this an excellent report. I have 2 comments. I hope that you will re-number the recommendations. They will have different numbers than the preambles. You have to start the first recommendation with number 1 and not as it is now. So in implementing those recommendations, we can refer to which number we are. My second point is that your 48, my 21 recommendation about the stateless, it is proposed that it will be together with the ACT Alliance and member churches. What if this will not mandate of the ACT Alliance? So I am suspecting after WCC and or together with ACT Alliance. And thank you very much for referring to the statelessness because it's a very important issue, especially in many regions.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Thank you, Moderator. Wesley Granberg Michelson, Reformed Church in America, advisor. I will speak in English. We give our thanks to the outstanding work of the Program Guidelines Committee. This assembly has consistently called for the deeper engagement of youth. I'm glad to see in line 22 and 26 that mentioned in order to deepen youth in our governance, but we really need to deepen the involvement of youth in the whole ecumenical movement. Let me remind the Assembly that in 1985, the Catholic Church established a World Youth Day to which they get 700,000 more youth, and they repeat every 3 years. What if we imagined an ecumenical youth day drawing on our partners, all of our partners, in order to equip youth for the next generation of the ecumenical movement? I would respectfully suggest that Program Guidelines ask the Central Committee to explore that as an option between now and the next Assembly.
Thank you. I was the bishop in Denver when Pope John Paul came for the World Youth Day in Denver once upon a time, and it really was incredible. Microphone 1.
My name is Tara. I come from the Methodist Church in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I speak in English. I want to draw committee's attention to paragraph 15 when you have listed there as a strategic objective as encouraging spirituality. And I'm a little uncertain about what that means. Did you have a particular spirituality in mind? It would be helpful to have some nuance on that. And then just to say I concur with our brother Jonah about the absence of lay formation in this document, particularly as we have a legacy very strong in WCC of lay formation. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Thank you very much, Your Grace. Paragraph 45. To add a commission on climate change crisis. The whole humanity is lagging in a V, and we need the sermon of repentance of the Prophet Jonas. Sustainable development goals. And it's very important that also the Commission proposed to the theology towards companionship, and we support this continuation. And I hope that also the new Secretary General to carry on what during the pandemic, our acting Secretary General released a report every month, so all the churches to find ways to participate in this important ministry of the WCC. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Thank you, moderator. Our appreciation for a very valuable report. May I draw your attention? My name is Gordon Cowens from the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and attempting to speak in English. Could I draw your attention to paragraph 38 and a request for the strengthening of this paragraph so that a stronger reflection of the importance of this matter. Perhaps in following words, Assembly affirms the models and methods, modes of reparation being employed by some member churches and requests its Central Committee to establish a process by which other denominations may be influenced to recognize the complicity of churches in the centuries transatlantic trade in African people and begin the process towards confession, repentance, reparatory justice, and reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all the time that we have for people at the microphone. Please send your recommendations to the committee, and you've got the email. You'll have the email address before you here so that they can get them in the next little bit of time. But I'll see if the moderator and the rapporteur would like to say something. Then I'll kind of just test the House, and then we'll forward.
We heard several comments that were, in fact, recommendations to the committee. We will take them with us and discuss them and come back to you tomorrow. I heard one question, the question on encouraging spirituality. The question was, which type of spirituality? I think this strategic objective is especially meant to underline that we are church, that it is Christ's love that moves the world to reconciliation and unity, that's the spirit in which we are together, where we are on our pilgrimage, where we are as churches together, and that we have to encourage our being church.
The last thing I would say is all the comments, if you could send them to us by email so that they could be addressed, including this one on spirituality as well, which I think came from Tara. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much. Let's just test the House and get a feeling for how do you feel about the recommendations that are brought forth from the Program Guidelines Committee. All right, I think that's very positive. Thank you. And so if you will then send your recommendations for any further considerations they should make through the email so that they can do that. Madam Moderator, I turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Program Guidelines Committee. Thank you, delegates, participants. That's quite helpful. I think we should be able to address the changes by tomorrow when the final report comes. May I test the House and see? We have two public statements that we would like to present at least before we break. And one is the statement on war in Ukraine, peace and justice in the Europe region. And the second one is seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. If you agree that we extend some time so that, please do not use green cards, either blue or orange. If you agree that we extend some time and receive these reports, then I would like to see your cards. Yeah. There is consensus. So may I invite the Public Issues Committee leadership to come forward and present the two statements and hand over to His Eminence so they are coming.
So, leadership of the Public Issues Committee, you follow the same pattern. Could you introduce, you see the statement, first war in Ukraine, peace and justice in the European region, and then recommendations.
Thank you, moderator. Yes, as we did last time, we'd like to introduce these two documents, and I'll hand over to our rapporteur.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. I would like to invite Reverend Dr. George Temer to present the first paper on the Middle East.
You changed?
We start with Ukraine paper, no problem. So please, Reverend Liz Bidgood-Anders, please, the floor is yours in order to read the paper on the war on Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, delegates, siblings in Christ. For he is our peace. In his flesh, he has made both groups into one and has broken down the dividing wall, that is, the hostility between us. So he came and proclaimed peace to you who were far off and peace to those who were near. For through him, both of us have access in one spirit to the Father. Ephesians 2, 14, 17, and 18. The 11th Assembly of the World Council of Churches, WCC, is meeting in Karlsruhe, Germany, under the theme, Christ's Love Moves the World to Reconciliation and Unity. The theme guides delegates and participants to take seriously the call for unity in Christ and to live as people of Christ's reconciliation with God and with one another. As we meet in Karlsruhe, tragically, we are witnessing a war afflicting Europe. The thoughts and prayers of all participants in the 11th Assembly of the WCC are focused on the people and country of Ukraine and the tragic consequences they have and are suffering since the Russian invasion on the 24th of February 2022. In addition to the thousands of casualties, including many civilians in the east of the country, and hundreds of thousands of refugees and displaced people since 2014. During this 6-month period, there have been over 13,000 Ukrainian civilian casualties, and cities such as Mariupol have been laid in ruins. At this moment, close to 14 million people, almost 1/3 of the entire population of Ukraine, have been forced to flee their homes, according to UNHCR. Moreover, there are many reports of atrocities that may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity, including sexual and gender-based violence, as well as greatly heightened vulnerability to human trafficking. In addition, we are very concerned about the risks of catastrophic consequences resulting from damage caused to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant by military activities in its vicinity, as well as containment security at the site of the Chernobyl disaster of 1986. At its meeting in June 2022, the WCC Central Committee deplored the war as illegal and unjustifiable, lamenting the awful and continuing toll of deaths, destruction, and displacement, of destroyed relationships and ever more deeply entrenched antagonism between the people of the region, of escalating confrontation globally, of increased famine risk in food insecure regions of the world, of economic hardship and heightened social and political instability in many countries. This assembly strongly affirms the position expressed by the Central Committee and denounces this illegal and unjustifiable war. As Christians from different parts of the world, we renew the call for an immediate ceasefire to halt the death and destruction, and for dialogue and negotiations to secure a sustainable peace. We appeal to all sides in the conflict to respect the principles of international humanitarian law, including especially with regard to the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure, and for the humane treatment of prisoners of war. We also strongly affirm the Central Committee's declaration that war is incompatible with God's very nature and will for humanity, and against our fundamental Christian and ecumenical principles, and accordingly reject any misuse of religious language and authority to justify armed aggression and hatred. We urge all parties to withdraw and refrain from military action in the vicinity of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and other such locations that may risk unimaginable threats to current and future generations. We join in praying for all the victims of this tragic conflict in Ukraine, in the region, and throughout the world, that their suffering may cease and that they may be consoled and restored to lives of safety and dignity. And we assure them of the love and accompaniment of the WCC Global Fellowship of Churches. We commend the local churches, specialized ministries, and all humanitarian organizations that are supporting the suffering people in all parts of Ukraine and beyond, and who are receiving and caring for refugees in full respect for their God-given human dignity fleeing from the war. As the Central Committee meeting in June observed, the WCC has a critical role to play in accompanying its member churches in the region, and as a platform and safe space for encounter and dialogue in order to address the many pressing issues for the world and for the ecumenical movement arising from this conflict. We underline the calling and obligation of WCC members to seek unity and together serve the world. The presence of church representatives from Ukraine and Russia, together with delegates and participants from WCC member churches and ecumenical partners from elsewhere in Europe and from all regions of the world, has served both as a practical opportunity for that encounter and a result-oriented dialogue for change. We commit ourselves to an intensified dialogue on the issues that divide us, a core purpose of the WCC. For the issues raised by this conflict are indeed deep and fundamental, both for the ecumenical movement and for the wider world, and warrant intensive and sustained dialogue to address. In the meantime, we reiterate the Central Committee's appeal to our Christian brothers and sisters and to the leadership of the churches in Russia as well as in Ukraine to raise their voices to oppose the continuing deaths, destruction, displacement, and dispossession of the people of Ukraine. We call on WCC to provide a platform for all voices for peace to be heard and amplified. And we pray that this war will come to an end very soon. The task of post-war recovery will be arduous and lengthy, with huge humanitarian, financial, and ecological costs. Churches are called to play a key role in the healing of memories, reconciliation, and diaconal care. We recognize that in war there are no winners, and that no one should ever resort to war. In response to increased militarization, confrontation, and weapons proliferation, we call for a much greater investment by the governments of Europe and the entire international community in searching for and promoting peace, rather than in escalating confrontation and division. We call upon the WCC, together with its member churches, to continue its approach of clarity and dialogue. We encourage roundtables and other formats where we can contribute to finding solutions to the conflict and its repercussions. We commit ourselves to uphold our responsibility to hold one another accountable for maintaining the bond of unity in Christ. Migration, xenophobia, and racism. Christ's reconciling love calls us to recognize and welcome our neighbors. Drawing upon the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10:25-37, in response to the question, who is my neighbor? We have heard and received Jesus' call to show compassion and mercy to all who are hurt and suffering without exception or discrimination. We use our resources, our voices, and our sense of empathy to respond to the cries of all who call for healing and wholeness. We are strengthened for this ministry and witness by Jesus' teachings and example, recognizing that he himself experienced the necessity to flee from those who sought to kill him, beginning at his birth. By Christ's command, we show compassion for all who seek refuge and asylum. Migration is an inherent feature of the human condition. It belongs to the whole history of humanity and the entire biblical narrative. However, in this period since the 10th WCC Assembly in Busan, new and persistent conflicts, oppression and persecution, accelerating climate change, development-induced displacement, and spiraling inequality have driven unprecedented numbers of people to leave their homes and to undertake journeys of desperate risk and danger to seek safety and better life elsewhere. Many of them have lost their lives. We affirm that we will remember them. We stand firmly in the conviction that the international protection of refugees and migrants should be based on need and respect for equal dignity of every human being, independent of origin, religion, ethnicity, or orientation of the persons concerned, as is laid down in international and EU legislation. That conviction requires the promotion of equal treatment and elimination of disparity and discrimination based on racism and othering, and ensuring respect for the equal human dignity of people from all regions. We affirm the legal obligations and moral principles that require a compassionate and welcoming response to people in need. We acknowledge and respect the prerogative of sovereign states to define arrangements for the control of their own borders and the conditions of entry and stay. At the same time, we expect all states, in Europe and around the world to honor the letter and spirit of their obligations under international law, including human rights and refugee law, and especially the right of asylum, or risk jeopardizing the very principles and protections established to respond to such crises, and to which all should be entitled. We affirm the statement from the Vatican WCC conference in September 2018 that to raise national boundaries and the nation state to an order of value above the recognition of the image of God in every refugee and migrant is a kind of idolatry. We consider it legally and ethically inadmissible for states to abdicate their responsibilities for saving lives and providing protection, or to seek to outsource them to other states and territories. We consider it unacceptable if people in vulnerable positions and who leave their countries aiming for a safer future are instrumentalized by governments or others for political reasons or for their own selfish gains. We also question the logic of a closed-door fortress mentality before addressing the challenges posed by high and increasing levels of movement and of people. We urge all states to provide for safe, regular, and accessible pathways and opportunities for human mobility in compliance with international humanitarian and human rights obligations, and to take proper measures against the abuse of the vulnerability of migrants and refugees. It is in the absence of wider channels for legal and secure migration that people smuggling flourishes. We call on churches and states to strengthen and extend projects for safe passage, like the humanitarian corridor initiatives and search and rescue services in the Mediterranean. We call for better coordination, cooperation, solidarity, and respect for human rights in Europe's response to refugees and migrants, including fairer sharing of responsibility within the EU, solidarity with those seeking protection, with those hosting them, and between churches should be the guiding principle. And we appeal for increased regional and international cooperation in addressing the root causes driving the forced displacement crisis, including especially violent conflicts, the accelerating climate emergency, extreme poverty and lack of development, and the oppression and persecution that force people to flee from their homes. We lift up and affirm the example given to their societies and their governments by the many churches and related organizations that actively engage in welcoming the stranger, the refugees and the migrants, especially in contexts in which refugees and migrants are increasingly stigmatized, discriminated against, criminalized, marginalized, and excluded. We affirm the God-given human dignity of all refugees and migrants. Based on that understanding, we urge WCC member churches and ecumenical partners, together with all people of goodwill, to promote a more open and welcoming approach to the stranger and to the neighbor in need and distress. This approach promotes a culture of hospitality, challenges us to reflect theologically on hospitality and fellowship with strangers, and leads us to help receive and care for refugees and migrants. The Assembly encourages the WCC to continue exercising a convening role and creating spaces for encounter and dialogue on migration with member churches and partners for the sharing of information, solidarity, advocacy, and accompaniment. The revitalization of the WCC Global Ecumenical Network on Migration should be considered in this context. We further encourage closer coordination and cooperation with the Church's Commission for Migrants in Europe, CCME, and ACT Alliance in advocacy and action, particularly in relation to follow-up to the UN Global Compacts on Migration and Refugees and upholding the 1951 Refugee Convention. Consideration should also be given to how the WCC might support member churches and their specialized ministries in addressing human trafficking, especially of refugee and migrant women and children, including by facilitating networking between churches and partners in countries of origin and those in countries of arrival. As Jesus has challenged and blessed us with an expansive understanding of neighbor, we commit to these calls for action as our response to his charge, go and do likewise. Luke 10:37.
Thank you. So this is the presentation of the statement, War in Ukraine, Peace and Justice in the European Region. So that is the title of the statement. Now, I think we should follow the same pattern as before, and I want to see how you feel about this statement. Could you please show your cards? It seems quite a lot of orange, beautiful orange cards, Madam Moderator. So now we are ready to take some comments from the floor. So, I can see microphone 2. So the first one, please.
Thank you. My name is Kjetil Fredheim. I'm from the Church of Norway. I'll speak in English. Thank you very much for a very strong statement. I'd like to address the use of the term Russia, and I would like to see a stronger distinction between Putin, the political leadership in Russia, and the people of Russia, which also implies acknowledging the suffering of people in Russia.
Okay, thank you. Could you take notes of all this? Yes. Now, microphone number 1.
Roman Sigov, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. I will speak in English. Thank you, moderator. 1 minute. That long a Ukrainian can contribute to the statement on the Russian war in Ukraine. This judged by the Assembly, I celebrate this gift, and yet I cannot express how much it hurts to hear the statement which treats the victim and the aggressor in the same way. I hope the committee will receive and consider our written comments on the statement. Let us hear the voice of Ukrainians when talking about the war in Ukraine. Because Russian Orthodox Church not only was participating in writing this document, but also has the biggest number of representatives in the Central Committee and here at this Assembly. Meanwhile, the members of Russian Orthodox Church support the war. Less than a month ago, Russian bishop posted a video of Ukrainian war prisoners and mocked them. He sits here and votes for the statement with orange and blue cards. I'm talking about Metropolitan Leonid of Klin. I know at least 14 Russian bishops who support the war, including the Patriarch Kirill. It's unacceptable. Let us transform the injustices and speak the truth loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, the comment is taken. Microphone number 4.
Friedrich Kramer,
Evangelische Kirche in Deutschland. Ich spreche in Deutsch.
Can you just 1 minute, please?
Ich wollte auf den letzten
5
Teil...
seconds, please, just for people to and the translators to get ready. Okay, you can continue. Continue, please.
Es steht im Bericht, ganz herzlichen Dank, der sehr intensiv ist und wir sicherlich noch viele Fragen dann diskutieren müssten, dass wir größere Investitionen nicht in das Militär, sondern in den Frieden machen sollten. Ich würde gerne dort diese Investitionen konkretisieren. Investitionen in gewaltfreie Konfliktbearbeitung, zivile Konflikttransformation und Initiierung von Versöhnungsprozessen. Das fände ich sinnvoll.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
I'm Pavel Pokorny, delegate of the Evangelical Church of Czech Brethren. I will speak in English. I appreciate this document. I just would like to add one sentence on the page 2. We think of those living in Russia and Belarus who are being persecuted for their anti-war stances, and we commit ourselves to be interested in them personally and by name, and to include them in our intercessory prayers. End of quote. I'm very worried about these people. They are vulnerable, and I think that we are obliged to protect them by our interest. These people are really blessed peacemakers, and if there should be any hope of reconciliation in the future, there will be most valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we cannot see here exactly the people, but let's start with number 2 again. I will still have 2 or 3 from the floor.
Thank you. My name is Benno van den Toren. I'm a delegate from the Protestant Church in the Netherlands, and I will speak in English. Thanks for a passionate plea, and it is, I should say, with trepidation that I speak about a situation of unspeakable suffering. But I would like to point out that one of the situations we see is that the war in Ukraine leads to opposing East and West in a lot of the rhetoric. 2 cultures, 2 civilizations, 2 systems of values. And I think we should resist that, particularly as this assembly representing people from different cultural contexts. And therefore, using actually words of my fellow delegates, I would like to propose that when it says we commit ourselves to an intensified dialogue on these issues, we add, we refuse to see each other as enemies and commit to an intensified dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think microphone number 4, I can see, no, number 4, I can see there Father Filaret. Could you take the floor, please?
Dietmar Ahrens, Evangelical Church in Germany.
Could you...
Oh, sorry.
You didn't pay attention. I mentioned the name of Father Filaret from the Moscow Patriarchate.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I just wanted to bring an attention that we have 1 minute during the whole assembly being blaming in everything possible to answer for all your expectations. I don't know how is that possible. This document was not distributed. I see it's available and leadership has this document, me not. So I need to talk about the document just listening the text. I think that it's not good for the documents of such importance. About this document, it's better than I thought. I thought that the document would be more politicized and more aggressive. I see that the Commission was working quite hard and prepared a document enough balanced. But still, it's one of the documents which gives us an example of information war. It's one of the documents which lights something and camouflage other things. This document can become one like statements of McDonald's and Starbucks. The same level of importance of this document, because there is no attempt to really look what's happening there and to bring at least one result. If the main goal just to blame Russian delegation, okay, that's important goal and you can reach this. But if you look in the whole document, there is no even one word about other parties directly involved in this process in Ukraine. Nothing about this. It's like President of Germany who was talking very powerfully with his pathetic speech. But one thing he forgot to tell, his personal responsibility for what is happening now in Ukraine. That was him who signed the document years ago, guaranteeing peaceful transition of power from the government to opposition. A few days later, he washed his hands. There are many other examples where call of your European churches to your government to do everything possible to bring peace. When there is a call, it must be victory. Victory. And only by arms. And churches keep in silence on this. And then you're talking that we want to bring peace as soon as possible. By blaming someone, it will bring nothing. So this document cannot be just camouflage a real situation by using some Christian terms. But it will have a sense if it looks deeply to the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Filaret. The point is that it's interesting that you affirm that you expected much worse, but the document in general, it's quite balanced. But each document can be properly improved, definitely. So you have the possibility to send some sort of suggestions for the Public Issues Committee so that they could take into account during the evening. So what time did you say, 8 o'clock? About 8 o'clock, to send some sort of suggestions that could improve the document. So that's it. In that case, we stop here with you have a point of order? Okay. You who raised the blue card, could you please speak up?
There's a young voice over here who needs to be listened to, I think, on this floor right now. Thank you.
Ah, this is what you meant, of course. Microphone number 1, please. Young voice.
Thank you.
Loud, please.
My name is Alexandra Kovalenko. I'm from the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, and I will be speaking in English. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm asking you to hear me and not compromise the obvious truth in sake of diplomacy. Just name it as it is, Russian aggression against Ukraine. If churches are not the ones raising their voices where there is violence and injustice happening, will we still be the salt of the earth? I also appeal to the delegation of the Russian Orthodox Church and ask them, if you are against war of Russian Federation against Ukraine, please raise your blue cards. It is very sad that you compare the blood of Ukrainian people to Starbucks and McDonald's. I will raise my badge as I don't have a card to vote. That is it. Thank you.
Okay, so from this moment, everyone who wants to make suggestions in order to improve the documents, please send it. You have the address, everything. Send it to the Public Issues Committee so that we can go further and take another statement that is on Palestine and Israel. So, but if you want to make any comments now, you can do it, but otherwise you have taken notes so that you could improve the documents according to the suggestions. That's it. Madam Moderator, you wanted to say
Thank you very
something.
much. Before we read document PIC...
No, only one moment. You go on.
Oh.
Thank you, moderator. Microphone, please.
Microphone.
Microphone, thank you. Thank you, moderator. First of all, to Alexandra, to Roman, and to Father Villarev. We are incredibly sorry if we have caused offense. This was never going to be an easy document. And Father, thank you for recognizing that it was better than you expected. That in itself is a testimony. We're dealing with deeply complex issues. We're dealing with deeply divisive and painful issues. This document belongs to the Assembly. It does not belong to the Public Issues Group. All we are doing is doing our best to present to you so we can take your feedback and make it better. This is not a final document. It was never intended to be. And so, Roman, to you, and Father Villarev, to you, you do not just get 1 minute, you get all of our time for as long as you need in sending the documents you want and the statements you want by the recognized time, and I assure you that the whole committee will take that into account and it will be included appropriately, and that is our promise to you. In terms of the other comments about a distinction between the leadership, the political leadership and people of Russia, of course, that is incredibly important and will be acknowledged. The non-violent conflict resolution and reconciliation, please do send us the text that you suggested. I just want to talk about an information war, and again, Father, I am incredibly sorry if that's what it sounded like. That was never the intention. But please do pick up wherever you think the document needs to be looked at. And that goes as well for anyone in the Assembly who has the right to do so, and we will address that. Do you have anything else?
That's it.
And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. I would like to invite Professor Dr. George Temer to
No,
read...
wait a minute, please.
Ah, I'm sorry.
You have something with me?
Okay.
Okay. This document, PIC 01.4, Rev, is in English and will be interpreted. The other language, unfortunately, we do not have the text, or there are some omissions, and so the operative document is the English text, seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. We apologize for the absence of this interpreted document, translated documents, but we are using English because that's what has the content that the committee agreed on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Now it's your turn. Come and present your text.
Thank you, moderator. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. George Temer to read the paper on the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. Jeremiah 6:14 and 8:11. Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Matthew 14:27. The World Council of Churches looks to the Middle East region as the place of the historical origins of our faith, where Jesus Christ was born, crucified, and resurrected. The worldwide ecumenical fellowship has always sought to be in active solidarity with the Christians of the Middle East, who are living in continuation of an unbroken line of faithful Christian witness in the multi-religious contexts of their countries, making vital contributions to the vibrant diversity and development of their societies. Upheavals, violent extremism using religion as justification, ongoing military occupations, discrimination and systematic violations of human rights, economic crisis and corruption, absence of the rule of law, and other factors have contributed to an existential crisis for all in the region. This is particularly affecting vulnerable communities, including Christians, who are facing displacement and mass migration. In the 11th Assembly of the WCC in Karlsruhe, Germany, we recognize the threat to the future of the indigenous Christians and of all the people of the Middle East. We affirm that the best means of averting this threat is equal rights, inclusive citizenship, justice and dignity for all, without religious or racial discrimination. We commit to the guiding principles of God's justice and love for all of creation, the fundamental rights of a people, respect for human dignity, solidarity with the needy, and dialogue with people of other faiths that remain the foundation of our ecumenical response to the region. Sadly, the reality on the ground in different countries of the Middle East challenges this vision. In Palestine, Israel, there is another wave of forced displacement of Palestinian people from their homes, sometimes on multiple occasions since 1948, as in Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, the South Hebron Hills, as well as in the rest of Area C. The expanding Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, especially those encircling East Jerusalem, are illegal under international law and threaten fundamental demographic and political changes to the region. Moreover, they have so undermined any practical prospect of a two-state solution that this path towards a just peace now seems increasingly unviable. The expansion of the settlements and the increased military presence that accompanies them have brought more suffering for Palestinian communities, with more encroachment on and seizure of Palestinian lands and properties, and increased systematic harassment and attacks by settlers, especially in the absence of the protective presence of international visitors during the COVID-19 pandemic. In Gaza, we have recently again seen an escalation of the vicious circle of violence. The WCC categorically condemns all such deadly and destructive violence, whether perpetrated by Israeli forces or by Palestinian armed groups. The situation in Israel-Palestine cannot be resolved by violence, but only by peaceful means in accordance with international law. We affirm the rightful place of the State of Israel in the community of nations and recognize its legitimate security needs. At the same time, we affirm the right of the Palestinians for self-determination and that the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories since 1967, as well as settlement construction and expansion in the occupied territories, is illegal under international law and must be ended. We believe that it is only through an end to the occupation and a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace settlement that the security of both Palestinians and Israelis can be assured. In June 2022, the WCC Central Committee observed that the discrimination against Palestinians is overt and systemic, and the ongoing half-century-long occupation continues to contradict the equal human dignity and human rights of Palestinians living under the system of control, while the response of the international community continues to reflect egregious double standards. The recent suppression of several Palestinian human rights organizations by the Israeli authorities without any effective opposition by the international community is an emblematic example of the system of control and these double standards. For Palestinian people, the situation is sadly compounded by the grave failings of the Palestinian authorities, including reprisals against opposition leaders and the lack of legal and democratic accountability. Recently, numerous international, Israeli, and Palestinian human rights organizations and legal bodies have published studies and reports describing the policies and actions of Israel as amounting to apartheid under international law. These reports conclude that the State of Israel is implementing an illegal system of separation or segregation based on race, creed, or ethnicity, and committing human rights violations and denial of freedoms. They have described the system as designed to maintain domination by one racial group over another, and the systemic denial of freedom and forced ghettoization of the Palestinian people. This should be a matter of concern, inquiry, and further discernment for the WCC. With regard to the particular situation of Christians in Israel-Palestine, we are hearing the cries of church leaders in the region more than ever before in relation to mounting intimidation, violations, limitation of access to places of worship, and attacks by Israeli radicals and authorities on the Christian presence and identity in Jerusalem, threatening the status quo and the multi-religious and multicultural identity of the city. Elsewhere in the Middle East, such as in Syria after the so-called Arab Spring of 2011, and in Iraq after the 2003 invasion, the people have been victims of conflict, wars, and proxy wars, violent religious extremism, gross violations of human rights, and of international humanitarian law and economic crisis. This has led to straining the already weakened social fabric, social capital and trust, paving the role for hate and demonizing and dehumanizing narratives of the other based on exclusionary constructions of the collective national identities. A prosperous life in dignity, safety, and security can only be achieved under the rule of law, territorial unity, and through sovereignty of the political, judicial, cultural, and economic institutions in both countries. Sustainable peace is assured if based on values of justice, equal citizenship, and equal human rights for all. We have greatly appreciated the opportunities presented by this Assembly for fellowship and Christian solidarity with sisters and brothers from the Middle East, and for intensive ecumenical conversations and consultations on the path forward towards a just peace in the region. The 11th Assembly of the WCC expresses the firm commitment of the worldwide ecumenical fellowship to strengthening our support for and cooperation with the churches of the Middle East, the Middle East Council of Churches, faith-based and civil society partners in order to seek a just and sustainable peace in the region. The 11th Assembly particularly calls on the members of the Worldwide Ecumenical Fellowship to listen to the voices and repeated pleas of the churches and Christian communities of the region, and to accompany them in prayer and action. All member churches concerned for lasting peace and security for all in the Middle East to engage actively in efforts of dialogue with all sides in order to find a solution that respects and upholds the human rights and inclusive citizenship for everyone living in the region. The Worldwide Ecumenical Fellowship of Churches to consult and reflect on an alternative policy, perspective, and comprehensive solution for Palestine-Israel, where all people have equal rights before the law, and as opposed to the current systems of control, exclusion, and discrimination. The WCC to study, discuss, and discern the implications of the recent reports by B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International, and for its governing bodies to respond appropriately. The WCC, its member churches and partners, to support and maintain the vital and precious work of WCC programs in the region, such as the Jerusalem Liaison Office, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, and the Palestine-Israel Ecumenical Forum. Engaging a wider WCC constituency together with the local churches, Christian communities, and other faith partners. The WCC to strengthen its newly created transversal program on racism so as to include the Middle East region. The WCC to increase its efforts in its present programmatic work in collaboration with its member churches to articulate principles for living together peacefully in post-conflict societies with equal citizenship, human rights, and dignity. The WCC to facilitate encounter and dialogue in the diverse multi-religious and multicultural societies of the region, especially of Syria and Iraq, to help protect these countries' religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity, and to promote social cohesion. The international community to call for lifting the unilateral sanctions on Syria that are harming the population rather than achieving their stated goals. The government of Israel to lift the blockade on Gaza. All Christian sisters and brothers to join in prayer for the release and safe return of the Syriac Orthodox Archbishop Yohanna Ibrahim and the Greek Orthodox Archbishop Boulos Yazigi, who were kidnapped more than 9 years ago. These beloved bishops have become iconic figures for all those unjustly detained, tortured, and forcibly disappeared persons, according to the WCC press release in April 2022. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Yes, so we shall follow the same pattern. We would like to see how you feel about the statement. Now show your cards, just to see the feeling. We see quite a lot of orange cards, so now we start to receive some comments from the floor. We start with microphone number 2, please.
Petra Bosse-Huber, delegate from the EKD, Germany. Dear sisters and brothers in Christ, the deep concern for a just peace in Israel and Palestine connects all of us. During my regular trips to the Holy Land, I'm each time more appalled to discover that the political and social situation has worsened in an unimaginable way. And as such, it has become even more hopeless for you, dear brothers and sisters who live there. The EKD, the Protestant Church in Germany, shares a building in the old city of Jerusalem with our Palestinian partner church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. When I listen to the stories of our Lutheran sisters and brothers and many other people from different religious and cultural backgrounds, then I am deeply moved to tears. But precisely because the situation gets under my skin, and I would never underestimate the dramatic situation in Israel and Palestine, the proposed path to a fundamental change in the position of the WCC and the use of apartheid terminology does not make sense to me at all. Not even after intensive reading of the papers and after many discussions. What political values adds this concept of apartheid terminology into the search for a viable way out of the daily violence and the never-ending bloodshed? It comes from a completely different historical background and does not the use of such escalating language just pour even more oil into the fire of an extremely dangerous trouble spot. The EKD, the Protestant Church in Germany, holds firmly in its double bond of solidarity with both Israel and Palestine. We are inseparably connected with our Christian Palestinian siblings as members of the one body of Christ. Be assured that also in the future we will not look away and we will not remain silent about the ongoing occupation, forced resettlements, violence, and human rights violations. International law must be enforced and the necessary criticism of illegal actions must not be defamed as anti-Semitism. But as Christians in Germany will live with a history where the generations of my own parents and grandparents have killed and persecuted millions of European Jews, the Holocaust and the Jewish-Christian path after World War II have deeply linked us. We are grateful that a relationship with Jewish people built on trust has grown slowly up this day. On this background of a double bound of solidarity with Israel and Palestine, we will continue to fight for a reliable and just peace in the Middle East. But, last sentence.
Last sentence, please.
But as leader of the German EKD delegation, I am stating very clearly, we will not speak of Israel as an apartheid state. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bishop Petra. Now we go to the voice of the youth, number 1.
Thank you, I'm youthful.
Doesn't matter if you are not youth.
I am youthful.
Microphone 1, please. Speak.
Moderator, I hope I'll be given 3 minutes like the prior speaker. Moderator, Your Eminences and Excellencies, colleagues, I'm Neil Pressa, a delegate from the Presbyterian Church, USA.
John Dorhauer from the United Church of Christ in the U.S.
Okay. I will speak in English. I rise on behalf of the Presbyterian Church, USA and our 225th General Assembly in partnership with the United Church of Christ and others in solidarity with our Palestinian siblings as we seek 2 amendments to this report, which was emailed 2 hours ago to the Public Issues Committee. The first amendment seeks to replace a 4th bullet point on page 4 in order to read, quote, the WCC and its member churches to study, discuss, and discern the implications of the recent reports on apartheid by B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International, and for its governing bodies to respond in line with a call from Palestinian Christians and churches for justice for their people. This amendment makes it clear that we call upon both the WCC and its member churches to study, discuss, and discern. This language makes it clear that the reference reports are with respect to Israel's government's actions and policies as amounting to apartheid according to international law. It keeps the WCC's governing bodies and that of our member churches to respond based on the call of our Palestinian siblings and churches for justice for their people. The second amendment seeks to correct the report on page 2, 4th paragraph to state that 16 member churches of the World Council of Churches, including the Presbyterian Church USA, have also joined the various human rights organizations and legal bodies in the apartheid assessment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to microphone number 4.
Thank you, Your Eminence, and I apologize to the translators that I'll be very quick so that as to get as much information in as possible. I thank everyone that prepared this document. Although I perhaps disagree with various parts in the document, I think that it's a great start to building a real conversation on helping our brothers and sisters in Palestine that seem to be losing their voice, or at least not have a fashionable voice in today's United Nations discussions, as the focus has turned on to other crises around the world. I will say, however, when discussing the issue of terminology, perhaps this specific terminology that has been used will not create bridges, but rather destroy them. How can someone really sit with us and listen to us when a group of hundreds and thousands of Christians sat together and not a single Jewish voice actually sat here and wrote or looked at this document, while there were many, many Palestinian voices in this document? So rather than look at the dichotomy or the different parties that are at fault, perhaps this paragraph should simply be removed. Thank you.
Okay, there are various nuances of opinions, so everyone has the right to say, we continue, because of the importance of this particular statement, we continue the discussions for another 2 or 3 speakers. So I didn't give the floor to number 3, please.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Rima Barsoum from the delegation of the Syrian Orthodox Church of Antioch and all the East. My comments are related to the parts related to Syria and Iraq. And that's starting from paragraph number 6 on page 2. While the statement identifies many internal obstacles to achieving peace and justice, it fails to address the international nature of the problem. External intervention, sanctions, militarization, and the geopolitical regional actors. And I would like these challenges to be highlighted in the statement. In addition to climate change challenges, Iraq is now named the 5th most vulnerable country to climate breakdown. Syria is experiencing similar challenges. So I will send my comments to the committee.
Thank you. Just that, please. Send the comments very clearly if you want to contribute to the improvement of the text. Now, microphone number 2.
Father Hrant Tahanian from the Armenian Orthodox Church Holy See of Cilicia, speaking in English. Thank you, moderator. I tried my best to condense the text, but as a young delegate and my first time at the mic, I hope Your Eminence will indulge me with 2.5 minutes.
No, only 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Please.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. That is very, very kind. I commend the work of all our committees and have been meditating on their work, our group conversations, and prayers. As my first assembly, I'm glad to share it has lived up to its history. It's been inspiring. Based on my Canadian background, Armenian heritage, time spent in the Middle East, and affinity to our indigenous peoples, I would like to offer the following contemplation in support to document pre-IP and all references to indigenous rights, opposition to war, and just peace in the Middle East within these documents. His Holiness Pope Francis recently visited Canada. Yes, it is indeed the Great White North, but no human history is exempt of human rights violations. And this repentance towards the First Nations that Pope Francis initiated was truly a breath of fresh air. As Armenians, we know all too well the harmful effects that lack of recognition and reparations can cause. We even have a term, white genocide, as in no blood is spilt, but the harmful reverberations of the genocidal act continue. The loss of language, for example. Western Armenian dialect is on the UNESCO endangered languages list, like many of the beautiful languages of our dear indigenous peoples. After World War I and until this day, Turkey refuses to recognize the first genocide of the 20th century. They claim the perpetrator was the Ottoman Empire, suggesting they aren't accountable. They also recently changed their name from Turkey to Turkiye, another attempt to whitewash their history. This shortfall in justice is what led to the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war. And as many have pointed out, Azerbaijan's caviar diplomacy that succeeded in buying the silence and neutrality of the quote-unquote free world is also one of the elements that laid the groundwork for the current suffering of the people of Ukraine. Indeed, without justice to all, there can be no justice at all. In 2015, our new president, His Holiness Aram, started a lawsuit within the Constitutional Court of Turkey to return confiscated churches. Though denied, it was taken to the European Court of Human Rights. Here we had hope, but one out of the 47 judges, a single individual, was able to refuse the case on a technicality. As the famous lyric goes, silence like a cancer grows. And this cancer has been disproportionately affecting the nations of the Middle East. Yes, Christ's love moves the world to peace, but not a Pax Romana or Imperia. I do not give to you as the world gives. This all being said, I am still hopeful. Pope Francis's visit was decidedly impactful, my last paragraph. And during this historic 11th Assembly, I am reminded we are in Germany, a country that, in contrast to Turkey, found the courage after World War II to live up to its responsibilities. And I am indeed confident that this House will support these documents. I conclude with the appreciation that Kanata, the Iroquois route of Canada, was indeed great, white, and stunningly coast to coast way before its modern history, and we are fortunate to live alongside its majestic and proud indigenous peoples. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Please do understand that we are helpful really if we send precisely the written amendments to the committee. That's it. The last speaker will be number 1.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Henry Weideman from the AFM of South Africa. I have 2 points, moderator. When we speak from South African context about what's happening in the Middle East, Palestine, I want to make it clear that it is not about anti-Semitism. It is about justice. Justice for our Christian brothers and sisters, and indeed justice for all faith communities in the Holy Land, which we hold dear. My second point, my concern is that some or most of the bullet points on page 4 are very vague. When you give a task to everybody, it becomes the job of nobody. Especially bullet point 2 and 3, that talks about all and the Worldwide Ecumenical Fellowship of Churches. Who is that? Is that the WCC? Moderator, I want to remind this House of the words of Bishop Angelos, which we heard earlier this week when he said, "We should not expect others to carry the cross of suffering in the presence of our silence and our inaction." I'm concerned that many of these bulletins, of these bullet points, take us further down the road of inaction. I close with the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who said, "Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act." Moderator, we have to act as the worldwide church on what's happening to our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. I thank you.
Okay, now the last speaker is Dr. Kavas.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Eminence. I have very quickly interventions. I suggest an addition.
1 minute, please.
I suspect an addition on the last page of page 2, stipulating the 11th Assembly affirmed the current policy of the WCC regarding the PDS of products manufactured in the illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. This is a policy of the WCC and we have to refer to it. My second suggestion is in the 5th paragraph at the same page, which is written as, "We are hearing the crisis of church leaders." We have a head of churches and not church leaders, and they never cry. And I have a piece of committee which I would like to send it to the email to them so as to replace this paragraph. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, leadership of the committee, you have a lot of things to do tonight. You have the floor just to respond whatever you like, but not in detail, please.
Thank you.
What?
Thank you for that. There is a lot to take in. Again, like the last document, this was never going to be an easy one, but I am thankful for the opportunity and thankful for all the comments. All of you have spoken, so the professor from the US, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, please do send us the amendments. The losing voice terminology, we do want to be a voice here, but I also agree with Dr. Henry. This document also speaks about action, not just about voice. Father Herant, thank you for your messages and please do send in your advice. Rima, thank you for having sent in your comments. Dr. Khawas, as always, please do send in your comments, and we're very, very happy to receive them. I think I have, and Bishop Petra, thank you also. This apartheid issue was very difficult, and the best we could get was something amounting to, it was never going to please everyone. We will continue to work on it. We will continue to seek the mind of the Assembly and tighten up the documents the best way we can, so you can be happy with them.
Thank you very much. We close here, and
Moderator.
Now
Moderator.
at 7 o'clock we have the worship. Now, what you there is a blue card there, okay? Blue card. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Theodora Isa. I am from the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch. Thank you for the work done on this document. It is really appreciated. But I can see that it has so much concentration on Palestine and Israel rather than looking at other countries who are suffering. There is one suggestion from me that the word genocide be included in the second paragraph of the paper, please. Because the genocide didn't end in 1915, it continues until now. And there is a call for prayers that the Middle East is not emptied of Christians, where they are the indigenous people of the land who are unrecognized. And another issue, I know we can't mention all countries, but Lebanon is suffering too. And it can't be only Iraq and Syria in one paragraph. That's really underestimation. Thank you very much.
Okay, continue to send those comments. Thank you. Now, moderator, maybe the announcements.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow we meet here at 8:30 a.m. and we'll have prayers here. And then we'll continue with the public issues. First, we'll continue with the Program Guidelines Committee, the message, and public issues statements. As you can see, if we can't get our work completed, we will have to pass it on to the next governing committee. Secondly, I'd like to say that it is important for us to go for our prayers at 7, hopefully, but for tomorrow also, we will have concluding speeches or at least some statements by our incoming General Secretary, the acting General Secretary, and the rest of the people. We want to thank the committees that have worked so tirelessly to have these documents. It is not easy. We work in different languages. We work with different backgrounds. Let us appreciate each other. Number one, peace is about, no, tomorrow they'll bring back. We have to move. Peace is about listening to each other. So if we shout at people on the floor, honestly, do we hear? Even if we don't agree with them, do we really then move forward in building bridges? No. I would like to ask Nora to say one thing and then turn on to the General Secretary for announcements.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, Your Eminence. It was just a point of clarification regarding the Syrian issue, just to clarify that the Syrian issue was integrated. The sanctions and also the international intervention was integrated in the paper on the things that make for peace, just for clarification. Thank you.
Announcement now. The evening prayer tonight takes place immediately after this session under the tent, and I strongly encourage to go because you'll be local Pentecostal churches, so it'll be a very beautiful spirit-led worship. Please prepare for your departure. Each of you received an email about your departure. Please read it carefully. You must know the COVID-19 regulations to return to your country. Review your travel itinerary in detail. In some cases, your train from Karlsruhe to Frankfurt includes train changes. Assembly luggage storage at venue is open from 7:30 to 19 on September 7 and 8. You need to leave Karlsruhe train station at least 4 hours before your scheduled flight for Frankfurt Airport, Frankfurt Flughafen, Fernbahnhof. For questions related to travel, contact registration.assembly@wcc.coe.org. Since the beginning of the assembly, there are 36 report COVID cases. Those persons follow the quarantine rules. I want to remind you again that if you are strongly encouraged to wear masks, test regularly and use the disinfection stations. If you test positive, send an email to covid.assembly@wcc.coe.org. And now the last announcement. The newly elected Central Committee and the WCC presidents will meet tonight from 20 to 21 in this room. It is a closed session for members and presidents only. All the members should be present. Thank you.
Just another announcement. The Public Issues Committee will meet at 8 o'clock in Novotel Hotel.
Let's go for prayer now. I think I keep it here now. I leave it here.